So thank you everybody for joining us. So I'm here with Ajahn Nissarano, and thank you Ajahn for coming. Yeah. And Ajahn was born in Perth, Australia in 1952. He worked in the libraries for 20 years before ordaining as a novice at Bodhinyana in 1997. Is that right, Ajahn?
Yeah, that's right.
He spent 9.5 years at the monastery before traveling to Thailand and then later to Sri Lanka, where he ended up living for about 13.5 years, about 8 of which was in a cave. Is that
8
correct?
of which is, yeah, that's right.
And he came back to Australia in 2020 and is now the abbot at Newbury Buddhist Monastery and has warmly welcomed me here. So thank you for having me, Ajahn.
Very happy that you've come.
Yeah. So we're going to hopefully dive into some of Ajahn experiences, both in his monastic life in Thailand and especially Sri Lanka in the cave. And as people who follow this channel know, we're mainly interested actually in the nuts and bolts insights that monastics have into how to live the monastic life and how to practice meditation. So looking forward to hearing some of Ajahn insights into those things. Mm. So Ajahn, I wonder if you might be able to tell us a little bit about how you ended up coming to Sri Lanka via Thailand.
Oh, right, yes. I had been in Thailand in 2001 and 2005 and come back to Australia after spending about 10 months in Thailand to be there with my mother because she was passing away. And then I went to Sri Lanka in 2006, June 2006, I think 15th actually, okay. Because one of the monks in the monastery, Venerable Abhaya, who's since disrobed, he was really Sri Lankan. He was really encouraging me to go to Sri Lanka, and I thought, well, yes, I'd like to go someday. But I went, and of course, when I went, I was really, I really felt very much at home very quickly, actually. Okay. And I spent my first rains retreat in Kandy, in the forest above Kandy. So it was really, really special.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the culture was just familiar somehow, similar to Australian culture? Was it just like a feeling that this is a place that I like?
Right. Yes. It was more a feeling that, a familiarity perhaps, and a certain, attraction to the forests, to the people that were there, and just everything came together, and I had. After that, I went to Myanmar for about 3 or 4 months actually, but I really knew when I was in Myanmar I wanted to go back to Sri Lanka, so I did after that. So
okay.
Yeah.
So did you stay at Udawatakele in Kandy, or did you stay in a hermitage, or?
I did indeed stay in Udawatakele. That's the forest above the town of Kandy. And it has those 2 hermitages in it, Senanayaka Ramia and they call it Forest Hermitage. Mm-hmm. So I was mainly staying in Senanayaka Ramia and really liked it. It was very nice. I still remember walking meditation and chanting the Ratana Sutta on the balcony of this hermitage, and so it was really quite an experience. Yeah, I liked it actually very much. So.
And did you have did you hear about these solitary kutis that were in Sri Lanka, or was it? How did you end up in a cave from Kandy?
Well, yes, nearly all the foreign monks that go there really are aiming to live in solitude. And some of them I feel may be going too quickly into solitude because, just a familiarity with the culture, the way things are done in monasteries in Sri Lanka and generally the way Sri Lankan people interact with monks. So I felt like I needed some preparation. So staying in at a few monasteries before that was very helpful. To ground me, before I went into solitude. In about 2010 was when I did. So I'd been there 4 years, so that's quite reasonable. And I'd been in Udawatakele, the Senanayaka Ramia, this hermitage in Kandy, and also spent time in Nissarano 1 year, Venerable Dhamma-Jiva's monastery. So I'd had a bit of experience from different monasteries. So I was used to the culture, used to all those things, and had picked up a little language, which is really useful actually. But some monks can learn it very easily, just listening. But I have to study more to pick up another language. So that was good to have some similar. Because if you're going into solitude, you do need to be able to communicate a bit, unless you're very good at body language.
Sure.
So yeah, that's good.
I remember when I was in those days, actually, you had offered to help me with my visa. You were at Videka Vihari, and I asked about coming to Videka Vihari to stay in a solitary kuti. That's right. And you were recommending me you should go stay at Nauyana first, or stay at another large monastery first, learn about the culture. Yeah. So I'm just curious, for monks coming from, say, like a background of the Thai tradition, and just wanting to dive right into solitude, what are some of the things about the culture, the approach to practice, that are going to be important for them to learn and take on in order to live in the culture well in solitude? Yeah.
It is just to know the conventions that prevail really in Sri Lanka, and how to work with those, and to feel comfortable with those. So I think if monks have had experience, say, in Thailand, that is a big advantage, rather than just because they've already got a practice going, and maybe, spent some time in solitude in Thailand. But of course, what's offered in Sri Lanka is much more serious solitude, actually. And even I've heard Sri Lankan monk, he spent his first, I think he had one vassa, and he went into the forest, and he said it was really tough. And he said he mentioned if he didn't have Ajahn Brahm's talks that he listened to, he didn't know whether he would have made it through that period, that vassa in Lagala, really, in that forest area, which is quite remote. So it's So I think there's a lot of preparation that's useful. And one of the things that's very obvious is that people's motivation for going into seclusion can be varied. Some just want to get away from people, and that's much more of a Western approach, actually. They just want to get away from people, and that, to a certain extent, there's aversion running there. And that's not a good quality to bring into seclusion, because that is what will play up. That's what will become enlarged by the experience of seclusion, by the experience of samadhi. So very important from an early stage to have a practice of metta, of loving kindness, friendliness towards oneself, to others. And of course, in Sri Lanka, the Kanda Parita, this is the spreading loving kindness to all these snakes and two-footed beings and four-footed beings, many-footed beings. There's lots of them. And when you're in the forest, you do encounter a lot of them. And so that's very helpful for living in the forest, because you will encounter a lot of these creepy crawlies. So it's very useful. And if you have that basis of metta, is very, very helpful for oneself. Then, I've been focusing on being at home with myself. That was my theme for my retreat during the vassa. And of course, being at home with yourself and that sense of safety and security inside, and leaving the world outside, very important. But the only way we can do it is with metta. That's how we can be with ourselves without being too critical, too judgmental, accepting our shortcomings, but also, being kindly about them, and having always, and this is always true for our whole practice, having a sense of humour about ourselves and how things unfold, which they do. They tend to unfold sometimes very unexpectedly. So when a new monk comes, say, from Thai tradition or another Western tradition, and then
heads off to do some preparation, say like going to a forest monastery, for just jumping off, can you recommend any monasteries to go to, or not just say like a monastery, but a situation to look for as a good preparation for solitude?
Yeah.
And having found that situation, what are some practice? So your metta is an important thing. So going through the day and spreading metta. Are there any other practical things that one should do to prepare, like getting used to the creepy crawlies, getting used to the environment, getting used to the food? Can you give any advice for monks who want to take that stepping stone to going into solitude?
Yes, that is it's very important, I think, to have some preparation, and the preparation is always going to be, physical, and it's going to be to do with the mind as well. So the physical really is, you mentioned it, getting used to the food, because when you go into seclusion, and the village food, the game food is much, much, more spicy, more oily and all that. So it's good to, have some familiarity with the food. And also, you make sure you've got things that are useful for you when you go into seclusion. So sometimes monks have these, they bring them from Thailand, these nets for you put over an umbrella, that sort of thing. That can be useful, or even a tent, So physical things, supports can be very, very useful. And of course, the community that you are a part of when you go into seclusion. When I say it, that sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Go into seclusion with a community. But Lagala, for instance, there is the community there of monks that they only meet twice a year. It's not like they are seeing each other on a daily basis. And where I was in Tanna, this is a place near Balangoda, there's a community there, and it's very supportive to have the community, and they will give you a lot of tips about things and about the insects, about life in a particular area, and so it's very, very useful to have that support with a group that's living largely in seclusion. Yeah.
And your own story, Ajahn, so from Kandy, what monasteries did you go to, and how did you end up coming to live in this cave for 8 years as a stepping stone from those monasteries? Maybe you could share some lessons that you learned from your own path getting to the cave, and how they...
Right. Well, I think the main lesson I learned was that it's good to have that preparation, and for me, it depends on character. It's different for different characters. It'll be different, but I think preparation is always good. And so by the time I went into seclusion in 2010, I was really quite familiar with the culture, with the food, with monastic, how monasteries work in Sri Lanka. So that was very useful. So I was in Udawatikele, this hermitage above Kandy, for a few years actually. I was spending time there, and also, as I mentioned, in Nissarano this is Venerable Dhamma-Jiva's monastery near Mitrigala, very, very close to Mitri, not so far from Colombo really. But I remember when I came to that monastery, it was very interesting, because I caught the bus. This is one of the things in Sri Lanka, they have bus coupons, so monks can use these coupon pots, they call them, and we can travel. So when I got to the Mitrigala, and I said, the junction, and got off the bus, I said, which way to the monastery? And they told me, so I went. And I got to the entrance of, there was two roads, one on the right and one on the left. And I asked this boy, is this the way, Nissarano And he said, yes. I went up there, and it was a completely different monastery, Dhamma-Vinaya. So I spent the night there, and the next day the next morning, actually a monk who became a friend actually showed me to Nissarano. And the chief monk was very amused that because my name is Nissarano, I couldn't find Nissarano on it. So anyway, so, you know, being exposed to the forest tradition that's particularly in Mitrigala at Nissarano was very useful too, you know, to spend time in their forest tradition. Because when many monks come from, say, some monks come from Thailand and they don't have that much experience in the monasteries, so they don't get to see the forest tradition in Sri Lanka. But also one of my favourite places, of course, was Kudumbigala, and I went there too and spent a wasa there. It was very hot and very dry, but it was very beautiful. It's an ancient cave monastery with it's over 2,000 years old, and I stayed in what's called the Giant's Cave, the Yodalena, and this huge rock, and it was just so inspiring to be in a place like that with this inscriptions, ancient inscriptions, everything. It was really, and lots of animals, the forest, good. Very beautiful place. So it really inspired me. So part of, you know, our practice is really big part is to find inspiration in where we are, obviously inside too, but to have that inspiration of being in a place where probably there were many well-practiced monks in the past. There were many caves there. And that area, lots of cave monasteries. So it was really, and so beautiful. This is part of the reason forest monasteries or forest monks live in the forest. And it always reminded me of a very famous forest monk, Bodhinyana Deepa. I asked him, Bhante, why 3 walls? Because he had 3 walled huts. Can you believe it? 3 walls, 1 wall missing. And I thought there would be some profound reason for this, you know, that, you know, would bring up, you know, mindfulness because you're open to the elements, open to all the snakes and insects, etc., and animals. But he said, it's so I can see the forest. Isn't that amazing? I couldn't believe it when he said that. So it is part of the practice too, you know, this sense of seclusion is very important for us, and to feel at home in that environment, feel the beauty of it, because usually they're very beautiful places. And Lagala, the place that I was living, you know, I was living in this rock overhang in, as I mentioned, not far from Balangoda, and it'd been used probably for more than 1,000 years, had the drip ledge, they call it, Kataram, and it had a stream flowing past the hut, or the rock overhang, and a small waterfall, and then a rock pool. Just perfect. Beautiful place, very beautiful place. So this is part of the practice too. And the interesting thing is, each and every one of us can do this. We can remember these places in our meditation, use them. And some people will remember where Ajahn Chah would mention bringing to mind sort of like a place of seclusion, and this is very useful in our practice. You can even do the opposite and bring to mind that you're meditating with a group of people that you feel akin to, you know, you feel this connection with. So that can be very, very useful too. Because we can use our perceptions. This is really the name of the game, is using perception to bring up inspiration, to bring up positive, wholesome emotions that will support the meditation. So, and this is one of the things that living in nature can bring up for us. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
So it's very interesting to me that you mentioned about using perception to bring up inspiration, Ajahn, because oftentimes, at least myself and I think other people, will tend to have this background idea of inspiration as something that just comes, right? You know, it just comes. You meet somebody, you're inspired, or you hear something, you're inspired.
Yes.
So how can we use perceptions to make that feeling more frequent or more stable?
Yes. I think it's a good question, because I do remember one of my very important teachers was Ayakema. Of course, Ajahn Brahm was my main teacher, but Ayakema, I remember going to a retreat with her. It was a very good retreat. The meditation was very good. And I remember going to an interview one time, and I said, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit flat, uninspired." And she said, "You've got to inspire yourself." I thought, wow, yeah, I suppose that's true. And that is our practice, really, to find things that will bring up these wholesome emotions, that will inspire us. So I think this is working with those perceptions. I use it even more strongly than that. So, for instance, with the perception of metta, this friendliness, I always bring to mind someone who has been very kind to me, that embodies kindness for me, and that really connects me with that feeling of metta. That's a very good way to start it. But I always like to combine a wholesome feeling with a meditation object, because then the meditation object is much easier to stay with something that's attractive. For many people, they say to you, well, the breath, boring. Of course, it's not boring when you can't breathe. If you have a problem breathing, asthma attack, you don't think like that. But so using, some of these perceptions to bring up feeling. Perception and feeling always linked. So these perceptions lead to feelings, and using those feelings with our meditation object, I use it a lot as a support. And of course, then it can take the meditation into that territory. Once we can stay with a meditation object long enough, then, as the Lord Buddha mentions, samadhi this automatic process will kick in, where we start to get this joy, this then like pamuja, then we get this piety, this energy through the body, then tranquility, then happiness, then samadhi. And that can be the springboard for seeing things as they truly are. So that's part of the cycle that the Buddha mentions, comes up more or less automatically. There are some suttas where he says you need not make an act of will for this to happen, this stage of, say, from going to joy coming up in the practice. It'll come from the previous stage. And he mentions a number of different causes for that joy to come up. But this is one way of the way I've been explaining, one way of working with it. It can be one of the sequences feeling like you're a good person, you're free of any remorse about what you've done or said, and that can lead to this happiness coming up in this whole sequence that the Buddha describes more or less as it is, as an automatic or a natural process. So the only difficulty we have with the automatic process is we interfere with it quite a bit. We try to drive our meditation rather than allowing that process to come up. Of course, we need motivation. We need to give us energy, but we also need to let go and not to control our practice. So often you hear of my practice, and I think, my practice. And it's really a natural process, and this is one of the things Ayakema often emphasise, that, for instance, these deep meditations, the jhanas, she said, it's a natural process given the right cause and condition. It happens. And not because we make it happen. This is how we think, because we're often so used to this idea of I, me and myself running the show, that it's very hard for us to let go of that. That's the big obstacle in the practice, and big obstacle for deeper states of meditation and insight too. So, so very important.
It reminds me, Ajahn, of a sutta in which Venerable Upali goes to the Buddha and asks to go into seclusion.
Oh, yes.
And the Buddha says, it's when my disciples see that they have the first jhana, the second jhana, the third jhana in themselves, then they go into seclusion. Wow. So would you say that this is an important preparation for seclusion, learning how to bring up inspiration in the mind, learning how to... It sounds like, from that description, that there's an active quality in bringing up the inspiration, bringing up the thoughts, I'm a good person, I'm not a bad person, and then there's a certain amount of not interfering as well. Is that a right understanding?
That is, because I think that only it comes... Not interfering comes from having the confidence that the mind knows the way into those deep meditations. And so Ajahn Brahm, for instance, he often says, it's like taking your hands off the steering wheel and allowing the autopilot to take over. When he said that, they didn't have the driverless cars, actually. So it was more like more scary. It's a scary thing, because I think that's one of the aspects of deeper meditation. That letting go of sense of self is quite scary. Because it feels like such a threat, or it feels like potentially like death. But in actual fact, it's obviously a prerequisite really for those meditations to happen. So very important to have that.
And so one of the things that, especially in the Thai forest tradition, that we tend to get warned about is, if you go into seclusion, be careful, you could go mad, right?
Yes,
and there's,
that's right.
There's also these suttas where the Buddha compare, if a cat tries to jump into a pond, he might sink, but an elephant jumps in and can jump in, get the food that he wants. Is this what you're referring to when you talk about that a person, he feels this fear when they're trying to... a fear almost of entering deeper states of meditation. And is that fear linked to any of the potential problems that could happen when one is alone in seclusion?
Right. Yes, it is potential. It is potential there for it. But really, I think the basic thing is to be on good terms with oneself first, because that if one isn't, then there will be. If there is a fear or aversion in the mind, then these deep meditations won't happen. And obviously, what will happen actually is sometimes when people are meditating, whatever we are, when we're developing this quality of samadhi in the mind, it enlarges, magnifies whatever we experience, whether it be good or whether it be bad. So it's very important to have the basic feeling at home with ourselves, being on very good terms, being kind to ourselves, and then then the rest of it will tend to flow. So that is really where the homework is, actually, I think. And of course, that relies on quite a bit of self-awareness. I think this is one of the things that's become very obvious to me in my practice and with other monastics, is, of course, samadhi, right view, is absolutely important, and the right intention that comes from that. Right view is very hard to check up on, but right intention's a bit easier, but we also need right mindfulness, samasati, in order to check up on that intention, particularly that aspect of chittanupassana, the mindfulness of the mind states that we're experiencing. So, because to know whether the intention is good or not, we can delude ourselves. So it's very it's very important in the practice. So this comes back to the 4 focuses of mindfulness, satipatthana. Very, very useful.
It reminds me, Ajahn, again of a sutta. Many of Ajahn's quotes are bringing these suttas to mind, or the teachings are bringing these suttas to mind, like the sutta of Venerable Sona, where he is just striving too hard and ends up with blood all over his walking meditation path. When you're talking about preparation and having a mind state of kindness towards oneself, I know that a lot of people coming from like a Western cultural background have a very strong attitude of like striving, which I think Ajahn has mentioned may have some good qualities to us. What I'm wondering from Ajah's teachings right now Could there be a linkage between that and like self-deprecation, self-hatred that could pose problems for somebody when they go into solitude, if, you know, striving too much, they can't achieve their goal, or being too critical of oneself?
Yes.
Is that the type of linkage that...
Yes, very much so. Yes, because when we strive, it depends on how we're striving, doesn't it always? It's always the how. But if we're striving from willpower, and this is often what striving equates to for many practitioners actually, is willpower. I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it happen. Rather than using, as Ajahn Brahms always emphasizes, wisdom power. Wisdom power is what's really required. And the developing striving and using striving, a sense of aspiration or determination, very important for energizing the practice, and definitely something that the Buddha practiced himself. He was a great striver. And in fact, when he talks about his ideal of a monk, it's a monk who is striving, who is practicing, who's giving 100%. So he says, he won't get up until, even if his blood dries up and his bones turn to dust, this sort of idea. So this is really, if it were required, it's really putting one's life on the line. But it's that determination is really coming from a mind state of, we talk about the mind as being not self, not me, not mine, not self. It is really the qualities we develop, and we can develop qualities of mind that are striving, so that it becomes a natural thing for the mind to do, not necessarily coming from a sense of I and me and myself. So this is important. Then it can be really powerful and very useful. So it reminds me of Ajahn Brahms. He used to emphasize it quite a bit, doesn't do it now, programming the mind, and this is very much, with these aspirations and also like determinations, just having something, having a direction in our practice. Really, direction goes with a sense of striving, and for especially young men, the idea of not striving, it just leads to a lack of energy, really, and a lack of direction. We have to work with what we've got, and that's very important. The Buddha often emphasized it, because a lot of the Sangha, he was dealing with young men particularly. So the sense of striving is very important and can be used in our practice, but not coming from a sense of self, aimed at qualities we wish to develop, good qualities, like we're talking about metta and all this, and also the qualities that are good to abandon as well. So this is very, very useful. I was mentioning just recently about, there's a sutta where the Buddha talks about he talks about protecting the mind, guarding the mind, and how do we do this? And he talks about greed, hatred, and delusion. And he said, before one goes into the village, one brings to mind, may my mind not be overcome by greed or aversion or delusion when it encounters things that are productive of these states, bring up these states. And just having, it may sound a bit sort of like, this doesn't sound like it would really work, but it does. I mean, I found from my own experience, the important thing is may my mind. It's not my mind. It's sort of like it's taking a step back from its ownership in a way. It's this mind that we're really encouraging to go in this direction, and then it really can work. So, programming the mind, striving, all these things, aspirations, can be very, very useful, because they generate that, we often call it chanda, desire for practice, to develop the meditation. If we are perhaps bringing up desire in the wrong way, it will be attaching to getting the results, like if we're aiming towards jhanas, to wanting these jhanas, aiming at them good, but sort of like attaching to getting them is really a worldly mind state we all have. We've got the getting mind we're pretty good at. The letting go mind we're not so good at. And of course the letting go mind is the one that brings up these states actually. So it's I know Ajahn Brahm once gave a talk, I think it was called Striving to Let Go. But it is, we incline in that direction really to let go. And the only way letting go happens is by wisdom. Really understanding something, really accepting something, and then letting go happens, Because people are always asking, how do you do letting go? You don't. That's number one. So it is really when things, as I. Kema would say, understood experience, that's a definition of insight, that we can let go. And then these deep states, these of meditation, of insight can happen, at the least expected times, I think, too. So good,
So when you went to the cave, Ajahn, yes, you went to Bodhika Vihari and then ended up, after going to these forest monasteries, connecting with this solitary cave kuti, far from the village. Is being in solitude an important support for our practice, especially like solitude in nature?
It's very helpful, very, very helpful. Obviously it's physical solitude, isn't it? And it is hard to achieve these days for a number of reasons, because of, for instance, wherever you are, you may hear traffic, you may hear aeroplanes. We get aeroplanes here at the monastery going overhead. So, all these connect us with society. But of course, the digital technology is one of the things too that is very, very connects us, takes us out of the forest and all that. So it's very important to have that sense of seclusion. Definitely, it's very supportive for samadhi. Interestingly, you probably remember that the Buddha mentions in the middle length discourses and the Fear and Dread Sutta that if you don't have samadhi before you go into the forest, you could potentially go crazy. People think that. But I think if you, I think it's still good for developing samadhi in living on your own, definitely. And it's very useful to actually be able to have a mix of the two, living on one's own and also then periods of time when you are in a community. Because if you only live on your own, you may find it difficult to live with others, full stop. But if you have that mix, it's very useful because you get a bit of insight into it. As I mentioned to you, I think when I'd been living in the cave for some time, I'd go every month to the monthly recitation of the monks' rules. And but I found when I was first starting to go, it felt a bit abrasive. Things weren't the way I wanted, and so that was very interesting to know. Then with time, of course, I was quite comfortable between the two of them. Part of that is familiarity, with the community, and also, with being also on my own in the cave. So very, 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 very supportive, both of them. But of course, that's they usually say that's seclusion of the physical seclusion, kaya viveka. But of course, what we're aiming at is the mental seclusion. That is, the deeper meditations where we've left the world, where we've left the five senses. That's more difficult. But if that happens, then of course you've got the ultimate seclusion, the best seclusion, because you're not going to be hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting and touching things. So you're inside, really inside. So this is what it's aiming towards. And then even further seclusion, from the defilements and all those things that we take as possessions. So no, it is really, really important. And you learn so much. You really do. When you live in nature, you learn so much. I mean, we now these days, we can see all these wonderful videos of animals close up, and it's in great detail and so forth. But when you live in the forest, you actually see the whole context of their lives. You see how difficult it is for animals, and whether it's the monkeys in Sri Lanka or here the kangaroos in West Australia, you just see so much, the snakes, all the insects. It's a real teaching, just in terms of what you experience in the forest. It's teaching you about the nature of reality, the nature of life. So yeah, I always remember coming back to my hut if I'd been away for a while, a couple of weeks or something, and I'd come back to this hut, which is like it's a rock overhang with walls that are built in underneath it, so the ceiling is the rock. It's very nice actually, really, and this was an ancient place. And I'd come back, and what would I be greeted by? Thousands of little beings, black ants. They were in the bed, they were everywhere, and it's really, I think at least once or twice I had to sleep on the veranda because there were so many beings in the cave, and sweeping them up, and is doing one's best not to kill any of them, and then taking them a little bit away from the cave, which could take quite a while with so many of them. It was just incredible. When we live in Australia, we don't, and probably in Canada, we don't have so much impact from insects and snakes. And
lots of mosquitoes in Canada.
Lots of mosquitoes, yeah. We're not too bad here, actually, in most places, but northern Australia, of course, many mosquitoes. But also snakes in the cave, so very, very useful to have that loving kindness for oneself, but also which gives fearlessness. It helps us to be less fearful of the animals, the insects that we encounter, but also to have that towards the animals and insects we encounter, so that is our insurance. It looks after us, the Buddha says, in the Kanda Paritta, to have that loving kindness towards all these snakes and insects. And when you live in the forest, you encounter them just all in Sri Lanka, not so much here, all the time. So I can remember, one night in this cave, waking up and seeing something move on the chair, and it was a snake. The chair was right next to the bed, a little table and a chair, and I turned to oh, it's a snake. And then I had this brilliant idea. I thought, I'll take this in the middle of the night. I'll take the chair out with the snake on it outside, and then it'll go off. I took the chair out onto the veranda outside. No snake. It had gone under the bed. And then I had to get the broom, and it climbed on the broom, and then I put it in a bucket and then carried it off into the forest. So you get lots of teachings, about all the life that is in the forest. And most of the time I did not feel afraid at all. It was really quite strange, really. I know one time it really came home to me. I had a bathroom, a toilet, and where I had a shower too. And I walked in the door, I nearly put my foot down, and there was a snake just where I was going to put my foot. Wow, that really... Then it was really quite... I thought, wow, that was close. Another time I came to that bathroom, and there was a snake wrapped around where the shower is. And, but most of the time I wasn't afraid of them. I'm not really, And so it was okay, I think because of the metta, and I thought, well, this is their place too, isn't it? So yes, so it's always teaching us. We learn from wherever we are, but when we're in nature, it's a good teaching because, as I say, there's a lot of romanticism about nature, and people are very, sort of dreamy about it and everything. But when you live there and you see these beings, really struggling, you see them, living beings being eaten by other living beings while they're still alive and things like this. You sort of get a picture of what their lives are like and how much fear animals live with. It's just very obvious, actually. So
it's a good one, Ajahn. And I know we were chatting a little bit earlier about especially food.
Yes,
some stomach problems.
Yeah.
And in addition to the animals, I mean, one of the features, I guess, of living in the cave is pindapata, going on pindapata every day.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what role does our relationship with food play in our life in solitude, especially if we're living alone, relying on pindapata? And how can that be either a spur or an anchor for our practice? Anchor meaning pulling it down.
Right, I see an anchor in that sense, not a positive sense. Yeah. Well, of course, we having physical bodies, we rely on food, so we need to go on pindapata. But for me, it was always very joyful. It's very strange, isn't it? Because you go with an empty bowl. Admittedly, in a Buddhist country, it's very unlikely you return with nothing. I only did that once, actually, because of I think a funeral was happening at that time in the village. But yes, it's really often a feeling of elation. It was really interesting, being in the present moment, just walking. And once you were off the main road in the village, that's more like sand paths, and I was barefoot. It was really, I really liked it. And also for forest monks, if you're living in seclusion, it was a way too of connecting with the villagers, because I had a regular roster that would change every day, different route every day, and so. Over time, you get to know the villagers, and they are great support for for living on your own, because generally speaking, you do need some support, for help, and the village is very, very helpful, clearing the paths, because as monks we can't cut the vegetation, the bushes, and all that. And some places it's very, very helpful because you have ticks and things like that on the bushes. I know one of the huts in the area I lived in, bad for the ticks. And the monk was wearing a raincoat so that the ticks couldn't stick onto him, and then take it off as soon as he got down past the path. So we rely on the villagers for their help, and I had some very good supporters. And that also, in a sense, even though you're in seclusion, you're very much, in that context, part of the village too, because they really value the fact that we go on pindapata, because basically the temples, or in this case the Pirivena, which is like a monk's school, you could say. It's a temple that teaches young monks. They don't go on pindapata, so they really love that. It's really quite an inspiration. For me, I would get a lot of mudita just going on pindapata and seeing the bus go past, and this would be in the morning. They'd be going into the main city, probably Palangoda, to work, and I thought, wow, they can feel a sense of inspiration seeing a monk go on pindapata, and that gave me joy. And when I was on pindapata, sometimes children would stop and give me their lunch. I did think maybe they didn't like it. Hopefully that wasn't the motivation. And I can remember too, people would be going to work and they'd stop. Often I can remember particularly a man, I think he's a school teacher, on a motorbike, and he'd often get off and offer his lunch to me. So it was really, really wonderful to experience that generosity, and just spontaneously too. It was really lovely. And as I say, it gives you a sense of connection, being part of the village. You feel that you are actually fulfilling, being something valued in that community, because to have a forest monk there, I think they really appreciated it. And of course, when I go on the pindapata, I'd go to the houses. Sometimes they would invite me to come in, have a cup of tea, or some of the rice soup in the morning, or the green soup, we call it kolakanda, with rice in it and so on, which was very helpful because in the morning I needed some energy. So that way too, you'd sort of create a connection with the villagers, the people that were supporting you, and you get the loop continues, because sometimes they're very inspiring. Actually, their generosity, their kindness, really quite amazing. Really very heartwarming, they say. It was really, so that's important too, because in our practice, one of the things that's very important for me is to that sense of not just doing it for myself, doing it for others as well, And so this is something that I find very helpful for the practice, that what I'm doing is of benefit to others and appreciated by others, and particularly there you could feel it. And so that actually gives inspiration, energy for the practice too. So and one of the things I do very often is dedicate the energy of the practice. We call it dedicating merit to other beings. We often say to unseen beings, heavenly beings, spirits, and all beings. Animals, insects, human beings, everything, all the beings. So it's really important to have that sense of that this practice is not just for ourselves, it's for others, and it is anyway, because whatever good states of mind we develop, whatever wisdom we develop, people will get the benefit of it. If you know very kind people, being around them very pleasant. If you know wise people, it's lovely to talk to them and spend time with them, and it can be very informative and really helpful for us. So, so to have that sense of our practice being an offering is, to all beings, to the Buddha, to the Dhamma, to the Sangha, but all beings as well. So it's very, very useful and can lift the mind. So.
And just jumping back to the cave again, Ajahn.
Yeah.
So really curious about your experiences here. One goes on Pindapata, comes back to the cave, and essentially has an entire day stretched out of them.
Yes. Yeah.
So, having the preparation, having feelings that you're a good person, what you're doing is a benefit, having a mind state of metta, having a good balance between aspiration and letting go.
Yeah.
On the ground scheduling.
Yes.
How much time should we devote, say, to meditation? How much to cleaning? Is it an individual thing? Is it something we should set a goal for? Is it something we should feel our way through?
I've never been one for a set routine, like a schedule. Some people like a schedule. I don't do that, actually. I'm much more organic and see what's required, So, one of the things you would appreciate from living in the forest is there's so much you've got to do. Depending on what the setup, just to have a bath is, you might have to go some distance to go to a stream, get some water and wash. For the first year, I was washing mainly at the rock pool below the hut under the rock, and so that was, everything is quite an exercise. Just washing the dish, washing the bowl, and all that. Disposing of the food, you've got to do it very wisely. And if you have any things like a water system with pipes running, water pipes that go up the mountain to springs, and then are feeding a tank near your hut, wow, then you've got to maintain that. And the animals always breaking as they run through. So just boiling water, wow. Eventually, because there are in that group, as I mentioned, that I was based in, one of the monks is an English monk, and he came up with, he found these Kelly kettles, and you can boil water in about 2 or 3 minutes, and it's like a chimney, a hollow chimney. You put the wood in underneath it, and the walls of the actual chimney are hollow where you put the water, and it boils very quickly. But everything in the forest, when you live in the forest, it's a lot more effort, a lot more work. But really, you know, I'm very much, and even the cleaning and all that is something we can bring mindfulness to. We can, you know, often if we have this rushing to get things out of the way and then we can really meditate, that's not good, because a lot of the time we'll be getting things out of the way and rushing, and the mind state's not good. So just to, you know, to do things and be there with it and enjoy doing them, you know. So not make them part of the life, because they are. When you live in the forest, they're part of the life. There's quite a lot of work living in the forest. So yeah, and the balance of meditation some in the morning, because usually I'd have the meal when I came back from the Pindapata, and then a bit of keep some for the lunch dana closer to midday. So, and have some time for, usually in the morning though, working, doing things that I need to, afternoon rest, and then meditation, and maybe some study, more meditation in the evening, some chanting, you know, a mix that really works for our minds, really. And of course, you know, with meditation, it's variety is important. So walking meditation, very useful, and I had a very nice walking path at that cave or rock overhang. And so having a variety. And, you know, also I remember doing some yoga there, some physical exercise can be useful too. Yes, it was really, it's a sort of, we have to, as it were, work with the mind and see what the mind needs, and also with what flows, really, what flows.
So it should have this sense that it's flowing well, it's kind of a natural and a good fit. Is it like a felt sense that you're describing there, Ajahn?
Yes, you might notice that I put a big emphasis on feelings, and I think that is important, that, you know, we develop these positive states of mind about what we do, and rather than, you know, the getting things out of the way state of mind, which is slightly aversive. This is not the practice. I want to get on to the real practice. The real practice is our mind, you know, and the quality of our mind wherever we find ourselves. So so it's all part of that mix, that's for sure. You know, exploring the forest too, that was lovely. I can remember one day when the mindfulness was very strong. It was really interesting. I think I had just gone to fix the water pipe for the umpteenth time because the animals just go through, and of course the water pipes are plastic and they come apart. And some reason the mindfulness was really good, and I started, when I came back, I was seeing all the details around me, and it was almost like I was in a new place, even though I'd been there many, many times. And I felt like, gee, there was the thought occurred, you could get lost. But I wasn't that far from the cave, but it was a sense of wonder. It was really lovely, actually. And that was a nice sort of insight, really, being a part of the nature. Usually we just have the idea that we are the observers of whatever's around us. But that was more a sense of being one of the participants in the whole of the experience, you know, the animals, the rocks, the plants, all these, the insects, lots of them. So it was really, that was quite nice, you know. So these wandering, and you find that, you know, I think that you know that yourself. I'm not a great wanderer, but some monks love to walk through the forest and explore the forest and all this, you know. So that's an important sense of, you know, that gives a sense of wonder, really. It's really nice, actually. Really, that was quite a magic experience, actually. That was good. Yeah,
it sounds lovely.
Very pleasant.
And so just a quick practical question for monks who want to go to Sri Lanka, not a long one. If a monk wants to find a solitary kuti in Sri Lanka, how do they find it? I mean, it's kind of where's the stepping stone to find these places of solitude?
Yes, I think the best one is to find those groups of monks that are practicing in solitude. Usually, particularly for the foreign monks, we tend to meet up with each other, and we hear, where these groups are, like as I mentioned, near Balangoda, and that other group near Martale, Lagala, and then we can speak to monks in that group, and then get more information. So, for instance, when I did already know about the group near Balangoda, but in 2010 I went to the Dhamma discussion with Venerable Deepa at a monastery not far from Balangoda, Ballyhuloya, and he was having Dhamma discussions for a few days, as I remember, really very useful. And it was from there that I went to this cave, and that's how I found that. I had heard of the group, but a lot of some of the monks from that group were there for the Dhamma discussion.
Okay.
And so one of the monks, Venerable Sumana, he was the one who took me to that cave that I went to. I stayed in for 8 years, and it was just wattle and daub, and there were some windows, and I said, there was only one window which was really just holes in the wall between the sticks and the mud. So you had this. I said we could do with another window. And so we went to the house below and borrowed a crowbar, like a crowbar. It was a bigger one, and he just poked the holes in another wall, made another window. So it was great. So it was really good. So
the benefit of wattle.
It was a bit dark in there without that light. But there are reasons for not having too many windows, because sometimes you'd wake up in the night and there would be these big forest rats running around the walls and doing laps. And I'd get up and chase them out and so on. So I didn't miss them when they rebuilt the kuti. They rebuilt that hut and had brick walls and windows. That was quite good. Yeah.
And just a couple more questions. I'm curious about your time coming back to Australia, Ajahn, but beforehand, can we get you some more water? Or?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
Actually, it's good, yeah.
So 2020, you came back here to Australia full-time after having lived for a long time in the cave. Having spent so much time in solitude, what kinds of lessons can one take from solitude back to community life?
Yeah. I think, one of the things that I mentioned before is you can take that solitude with you inside, as a feeling for a place or of your time you spent at that place. So, for instance, I often recall that rock overhang, that cave that I was in for 8 years, and that is something very useful for the meditation, because we can remember it and bring it up. It's like a perception in the mind, and the associations with it just flow from that, and that can be very helpful for the meditation. The sense of seclusion. Yes, being in seclusion is very, very helpful, really, because we are human beings, kangaroos too, actually, very social beings we are. And it's really in seclusion that we can learn a lot about ourselves and how this body and mind works, because we tend to interact a lot, but when we are removed from that interaction, then of course we're going to see a lot more of what's going on in our minds. And when you live on your own, there's nobody else to blame for whatever's happening. You can't, So it's very, it's really a great experience. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the mind, about the body. It's all very useful for when you come back to live in, say, in a community. Come back, in my case, to Australia, because really. If we can have that sense of seclusion within ourselves, even in a group, we can, and particularly in our meditation, very supportive, very helpful. So it's something that we can bring back. Of course, whatever we learn, wherever we are, actually, we can bring into our practice, into our lives. So that was, that was also, coming back to Australia. It wasn't intended, really. I was coming for a medical checkup and got caught by COVID.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that, and then I came here to the monastery. I thought, well, they need a senior monk, and of course, one of the big power sources for Ajahn Brahman, for all of us, really, is that sense of being useful, being helpful, being of service to others. And in doing that, it's also a benefit to ourselves. So that became the focus, because now, I'm in my 70s, so, you feel like it's good to give something back before this life ends, And of course, as you get older, there's no guarantee when that will be. It's no guarantee even earlier than that, but it becomes more and more apparent. So to be of service, to be of use to others, to be helpful. And in the process, it really helps one's own practice. Because sometimes people think, when you teach, you're doing it for others. You're doing it for yourself too. I learn a lot when I'm teaching, because it focuses the mind in a way that I possibly am too lazy to do when I'm just on my own. It really does focus you in the present moment. And also some of the feedback that you get from people that you're talking with, discussing with, can be very different from what we have in mind. So it's very useful, a great learning experience. And also one of the things you always see, and I think I could see it at Bodhinyana, and it's very obvious from Ajahn Brahma and everything, is when a big part of a monk's and a nun's life is counselling. We hear a lot about dukkha, a lot about dukkha. So it is actually, that is still very, very helpful for us, not to depress us or anything, but just to see the nature of life. And see, when you see all that dukkha in life, you realise, what can we do about this? And of course, it's the practice, working on the mind, developing wisdom, developing good states of mind. This is really become so obvious that this is the imperative, and to be as unencumbered, to have as possible to do that is very useful, because many people, particularly the lay community, a lot of responsibilities and duties, and even monastics have that too. If you're like a senior monk like myself, then that can be it can be a bit of a burden, but it's also something that we can give to others, serving the monastic community as well as the lay community. So it's useful, so good. But seeing dukkha is really very important for all of us. It's very obvious, but to really see how pervasive it is, and how driven it is by change, by impermanence, because we may have things the way we like for some time, but then it will change. And it's not always negative, as we point out. Sometimes if you've been very, very sick, and then for it to pass, that's a great happiness. The ending of dukkha is sukha, happiness. So so this interplay between impermanence and this dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness, and always non-self. This is the big one for all of us. That will really, that I think is what unleashes the practice in its full power. When there's limitations, there's presence of I, me, and myself are somewhat removed or slightly demolished, and then all the way to full awakening. So this is possible. But so this all of these characteristics of reality of life, very important. And I think as we develop our practice, as we live in nature, as we live in the forest, we see a lot of it, anicca, dukkha, and anatta. You see the process that's running, that is not personal. And of course, as you get older as a human being, you see the process too, because you may think that I'm the owner of this body. I'm running it. It's my body. But as you get older, you realise, no, it's not. We're not the owners. We're just tenants. We're just temporary tenants in these bodies. And so, as Ajahn Chah has said, if the body could speak to us, it would be saying all the time, "You don't own me. You don't own me." And so that's something that becomes more obvious as you get older. So good. So this is really where all our practice is going towards, understanding the nature of reality, and really getting the huge joy that will come from that. Because the Buddha mentions that seeing the Four Noble Truths is a source of great happiness. What do you say? Only joy and happiness if we see the Four Noble Truths. So, and it comes from a sutta that I like a lot. It's called 100 Spears. Is it 100 Spears or 1,000? 100 Spears. And the Buddha says, if we were to make a deal with somebody that we were pierced by 100 spears at dawn, at midday, and in the evening, but at the end of 100 years we would get to see the Four Noble Truths. He said that would be a good deal if that was the case. But he said that is not to say that the seeing of the Four Noble Truths is accompanied by suffering and distress. On the contrary, it is only accompanied by joy and happiness. So this is where insight will take us. This is the big insights and make the permanent changes to that ignorance in our minds. So thank you very much for for your questions.
Yes, thank you, Ajahn, very much for sharing your insights, your wisdom, and your experience over the course of your long monastic life. I'm coming away feeling inspired that it feels like there's this single thread in your teachings, through all the various modes that you've gone through, being in seclusion, being in community, being maybe a student, being maybe a teacher now. And it seems like all these modes are aimed at Nibbana. Is that a correct?
Yes, of course they are, because this is what seeing the nature of reality leads to. And of course, experiencing Nibbana is the end of rebirth, finishing, or coming back again and again. So this is what the path is aiming for, and exactly. Sadhu, 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 sadhu.
So I'll just make a quick. Ajahn Nissarano is the abbot of Newbury Buddhist Monastery, and for those who want more information about Ajahn Nissarano and his teachings, they can be found at the Buddhist Society of Victoria website, and also the monastery here has a website as well.
It's on the Buddhist Society.
All on the Buddhist Society. And also, I'm actually been staying at a really lovely retreat center that's located at this monastery. So for people who want to find seclusion in Australia, can find it here at monasteries like this that have these dedicated retreat spaces. So I'll plan to put the link to the BSV website up on the description, and you can find more information about Ajahn Nissarano's teachings, about the monastery, and about coming on retreat here if it interests you. So thank you again, Ajahn.
Thank you.
Sadhu.
Sadhu.